3, 2, 1.
Have you ever felt like you were being watched, only to find no one there? Or maybe you've caught a glimpse of something in the corner of your eye, only for it to vanish the moment you turn to look. For one person, these fleeting moments were just the beginning of an experience so terrifying, it changed the way they viewed the world forever. Tonight we're diving into a true story, one that's been shared by someone who wishes to remain anonymous, but insists every word is true. This isn't just another ghost story to entertain around a campfire. What happened to them is unexplainable, unnerving, and entirely real. The story takes place in a small, quiet town where everyone knew each other, and strange occurrences were whispered about but rarely taken seriously. It was the kind of place where urban legends were born, but quickly dismissed. That's what the protagonist thought too, until they became the center of one such story. What started as faint whispers and fleeting shadows turned into an ordeal that left scars, both physical and emotional. If you think you've experienced fear before, think again. This is fear in its purest, rawest form. Stay tuned, because this story will have you questioning every creak, shadow, and whisper in your own home. The story begins in the fall of 2018. The protagonist, whom we'll call Emma, had just moved into a modest two-story house on the outskirts of town. She was starting fresh after a tough breakup, eager to create a new chapter in her life. The house was old but full of character. Creaky wooden floors, vintage wallpaper, and a large attic that she hoped to turn into a workspace. At first, Emma loved the peace and quiet of her new home. Her neighbors were friendly but kept to themselves, and the area was surrounded by dense woods that seemed to stretch endlessly. She felt a sense of calm in her new surroundings, but it wasn't long before things started to feel off. The first incident was subtle. One night, as Emma sat in her living room, binge-watching her favorite TV show, she heard what sounded like faint footsteps coming from upstairs. She paused the show and listened, but the noise stopped. She brushed it off, telling herself it was just the house settling, or maybe a squirrel on the roof. The next few days were uneventful, and Emma had all but forgotten about the noise, until it happened again. This time the footsteps sounded louder, heavier, as if someone was walking directly above her. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Emma grabbed her phone and quietly tiptoed upstairs, determined to prove to herself that she was imagining things. She checked every room, even the attic, but found nothing. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She started noticing other oddities, doors that she was sure she had closed being slightly ajar, items moving from where she had left them, and an unsettling chill that seemed to linger in certain parts of the house. One night, Emma decided to call her best friend Sarah for advice. As they spoke, Sarah laughed it off, joking, "Maybe you've got a friendly ghost, or maybe it's just an old house being an old house." Emma tried to laugh along, but deep down she knew something was different. This didn't feel like the quirky quirks of an old house. This felt intentional. The final straw came a week later when Emma was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. As she reached for a knife from the counter, she felt an icy gust of wind blow past her. It was so cold that she shivered, but every window in the house was closed. That night, Emma decided to install cameras in the house. She wasn't sure what she was expecting to find, but she needed some kind of reassurance, or proof that she wasn't losing her mind. The setup was complete, and she went to bed, trying to convince herself that the cameras would reveal nothing out of the ordinary. But Emma had no idea that what the cameras would capture would haunt her for the rest of her life. The next morning, Emma eagerly reviewed the footage from the cameras. At first, everything seemed normal, just hours of silence broken by the occasional creak of the house. But as she skimmed through the recordings, something caught her eye. Around 2:47 a.m., one of the cameras positioned in the hallway upstairs captured a strange movement. The footage showed her bedroom door slowly creaking open, even though she distinctly remembered closing it before going to bed. Her heart began to race as she rewound the footage, watching it again and again. The door didn't simply drift open as if pushed by a draft. It moved deliberately, as though someone or something had gently nudged it open. But that wasn't all. A few seconds after the door opened, the camera picked up a faint shadow moving across the hallway wall. It was fleeting, but its shape was unmistakable. Tall, humanoid, but distorted, like something out of a nightmare. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a trick of the light, or perhaps the camera was glitching. But deep down, she knew this wasn't normal. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, her heart pounding with every little sound the house made. Around midnight, she heard it again. Those same heavy footsteps, this time directly outside her bedroom door. She froze, too terrified to move. The sound stopped, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, her bedroom door handle began to rattle. Emma bolted upright, her chest tightening as panic set in. She grabbed her phone and whispered a call to Sarah, her voice trembling as she begged her friend to stay on the line. "Emma, get out of the house," Sarah urged. But Emma was paralyzed with fear. The rattling stopped, but the sense of dread lingered. Just as Emma thought it was over, her bedroom window suddenly slammed shut with a deafening bang, even though it had been locked. She screamed and ran out of the room, clutching her phone as she fled downstairs. She didn't stop until she was outside, on the front lawn, shivering in the cold night air. But the nightmare wasn't over. When Emma reviewed the camera footage the next day, she discovered something that made her stomach drop. The same shadowy figure had been standing at the foot of her bed for nearly 10 minutes before disappearing without a trace. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound. It simply stood there, watching her. Emma couldn't stay in the house after that. She packed a bag and left to stay with Sarah, leaving the cameras running in the hopes of capturing more evidence. And evidence she got. Over the next few nights, the cameras picked up a series of unsettling events, furniture moving on its own, doors slamming, and the shadowy figure reappearing in various rooms. But the most chilling moment came when the figure turned directly toward one of the cameras. Its face was featureless, just a dark void, but it seemed to stare directly into the lens, as if it knew it was being watched. That was the last straw. Emma contacted a paranormal investigator, desperate for answers. The investigator conducted an extensive review of the footage and explored the house, eventually confirming what Emma feared most. Her house was not just haunted, it was inhabited by a malevolent entity. Emma's decision to involve a paranormal investigator was both a blessing and a curse. While the investigator provided her with answers, those answers only deepened her fear. He explained that the entity in her house wasn't a simple ghost. It was something much darker, something malevolent. The investigator theorized that the entity had attached itself to the house long before Emma moved in. He mentioned reports from previous owners who had left under mysterious circumstances, though none had ever spoken publicly about their experiences. "You're not the first," he told her, his tone grim. Emma learned that the attic, the very space she had hoped to turn into her creative workspace, was likely the focal point of the activity. The investigator shared that items left behind in the attic, old furniture, tattered clothing, and even a cracked mirror, could be linked to the entity's presence. Desperate for relief, Emma agreed to let the investigator perform a cleansing ritual. The process was intense, involving sage, chanting, and the placement of protective symbols throughout the house. As the ritual progressed, Emma felt the atmosphere grow heavier, as though the entity was resisting. At one point, during the cleansing, the investigator abruptly stopped. His face had gone pale, and he motioned for Emma to step outside with him. "Something doesn't want us here," he said, his voice shaking. That night, Emma stayed with Sarah while the investigator completed his work. He assured her that the cleansing should weaken the entity's hold on the house, but he couldn't guarantee it would leave entirely. "These things are unpredictable," he warned. For a few days the house was quiet. Emma cautiously returned, hoping the worst was behind her. But the peace didn't last. It started with the faint smell of smoke in the attic, even though there was nothing burning. Then came the whispers, low guttural murmurs that seemed to echo through the walls. Emma tried to ignore them, telling herself it was her mind playing tricks on her. But one night, as she lay in bed, she was jolted awake by a loud crash. She ran downstairs to find her dining room table flipped over. The chairs scattered across the floor. The air was thick with the same icy chill she had felt in the kitchen weeks earlier. Emma realized that the entity hadn't left. It had only grown angrier, unable to endure the torment any longer. Emma made the difficult decision to leave the house for good. She sold it at a loss, unwilling to subject anyone else to the horrors she had endured. Even after moving to a new apartment, Emma couldn't escape the memories or the fear. She still woke up in the middle of the night, expecting to see the shadowy figure at the foot of her bed. She avoided mirrors and kept all her doors firmly closed, even during the day. Occasionally, she would hear faint knocks or feel an inexplicable chill, and her heart would race with the fear that the entity had followed her. Emma's story is a chilling reminder that some places are better left untouched, and some forces are beyond our understanding. Whether you believe in the paranormal or not, one thing is certain: Emma's experience will haunt her forever. Emma's story serves as a chilling reminder that the world is full of mysteries we may never fully understand. Whether it's a spirit bound to a place or something far more sinister, one thing is certain: the paranormal isn't something to take lightly. Her experience isn't just a ghost story, it's a harrowing encounter that has left her questioning everything she thought she knew about reality. The shadows in the corner of her eye, the whispers in the dead of night, the sensation of being watched, they're not so easily ignored anymore. As Emma continues to rebuild her life, she warns others to trust their instincts and to never ignore the small signs. The odd sounds, the cold chills, the uneasy feelings, sometimes they're more than just a trick of the mind. So the next time you hear footsteps when you're home alone, or feel a presence you can't explain, ask yourself, is it really nothing? Or could it be something waiting, watching, just out of sight? Let this story serve as a warning. Sometimes the scariest stories aren't the ones we tell for fun. They're the ones that are true. If you've ever experienced something you can't explain, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy hearing true horror stories like this one, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell, because sometimes the scariest stories are still out there waiting to be told.